A very good evening, and thanks for clicking on to the Monday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. Lots of things going on at the moment. Of course, we have got Storm Agnes now named by the Met Office. We will discuss that in great detail in just a second. But before we continue with the video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. There is a lot of content here on markvoganweather.com on YouTube to look at. We will touch on some winter stuff this upcoming week as well. So, yeah, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in winter weather and also learning about the big picture, looking at all the drivers globally that can contribute to a particular winter pattern. A big contributing factor, of course, is the Madden-Julian oscillation, that pulse of enhanced upward motion thunderstorm activity that rotates around the equatorial world. And of course, when it is fairly active, it can have significant influence on the northern hemispheric pattern. Now, it has been rather subdued in recent times, but it looks as if we are seeing a little bit of an uptick. Notice here the greens representing upward motion through Indonesia and the West Pacific. At the moment here, we've got that large scale sinking over the East Pacific, the Americas, and the Atlantic here, despite the fact that we do have hurricane activity at the moment here. But what this suggests, now if we look at the various phases of the Madden-Julian oscillation, and this is an article off the website, so be sure to check it out if you haven't already done so. Also, the Global Weather and Climate Report was released yesterday, edition 60, a two-parter looking at the extremes taking place around the world at the moment, of course. But you can see here phases 3, 4, 5 into 6. If you look at this particular graphic here, it indicates exactly what those phases represent in terms of, if I can try and get to the right chart, it would certainly help. And you can see here the various phases of the MJO. So phases 4, 5, and 6 represents a positive North Atlantic oscillation. So that in turn means a mild, unsettled, and UK winter westerly. So this graphic actually is more responsive to the winter type pattern for the UK and Europe here. But notice here it goes into phases 5, which is blocking high pressure over the UK and Europe here. And then once you get into phases 7, 8, and 1, that tends to relate to colder conditions, or more favourable cold conditions for the British Isles here. But it's interesting when we look at this here and then we'll look at the GFS Ensemble here. It looks as if there is a delayed but not denied potential for higher pressure building as we move out of September and into the month of October. So this is off the GFS Ensemble, the upcoming 5-day 500 millibar geopotential height anomaly here. So we've got that negative to the west of the British Isles and Ireland here. We've got higher pressure over the continent. We've got a low pressure over the central Mediterranean basin. That means that we've got essentially areas of low pressure riding up through Ireland, the Northern Ireland, and southern Scotland. We've got higher pressure further south and east, lower pressure further north and west here, which would represent wetter conditions further north and west, drier conditions. This is in the means, of course. But remember what I just showed you there with the MJO essentially shifting through the continental maritime region into the western portion of the Pacific. That then in turn can lead to higher pressure, that high over Europe, trying to push a little bit further west. And the 6 to 10 day, and then even into the 11 to 15 day, which takes into the first 10 days of October, you can see higher pressure trying to kind of shift further west here. And that could be that direct response to the Madden-Julian oscillation becoming a little bit more active and shifting eastwards into the west portion of the Pacific. Now, in winter, this would be quite a mild setup for the British Isles, as shown in the graphic just previous. So we'll watch this space. It looks as if it could be possibly a warmer pattern and also a drier pattern and more settled, more importantly, a more settled regime into the early portion of October here. Of course, the NAO has been fairly negative, of course, has been for the last few months, and quite often with these negative NAO summers, you can start to see a little bit of a break in the pattern. Even wet autumns can have a spell for a week or two, a couple of weeks even, of more settled conditions. Now, we have got a fairly active jet stream at the moment. We are keeping an eye. We mentioned this away last week. There was a system, a tropical system that went into the Carolinas, but there was a piece of the energy on the north side of that circulation that broke off and got caught in a fairly southward displaced jet stream. Now, if we look at this chart, this is off the GFS Ensemble as well. There's that system over the Carolinas here. Now, notice here we've got a jet stream on the eastern side of that system here. We've got a fairly strong jet streak coming out of the Canadian Maritimes out into the Atlantic, but it's quite far south, if you notice. And that is understandable when you look at the 850 temperature profile here of the North Atlantic. This is, of course, temperature anomalies, temperature, not anomalies, but temperature at approximately 4,700 feet to about 5,000 feet. This is quite a good representation of the type of air mass we're actually dealing with. So, of course, there's an area of low pressure to the northwest of the UK. We've got relatively fresh conditions. We had another sub 20 Celsius day yesterday across the British Isles, so relatively cool conditions. But notice here to the west flank of this area of low pressure to the northwest of the British Isles, we're seeing some fairly cold air getting drawn out of Greenland. And of course, we've got warmer, thanks to tropical systems trying to push north. That increases that temperature differential between north and south, and then in turn, we increase the strength of the jet stream. Now, the reason why we had the system essentially breaking off that main tropical low is because of the jet stream and the upper air dynamics. Now, it gets forced up into this jet core and then shifted across the central Atlantic. Now, what we are going to see is that system essentially moving from the south side to the north side of the jet stream, and that is what allows the system to deepen. And if we watch this very carefully, you can see here this high pressure centered almost bang slap between the Bermuda and Azores region of the Atlantic. We've got quite a southward displaced trough. There's that area of low pressure at the 970 millibars. We've got a reasonable squeeze in the isobars, so a fairly brisk southwesterly wind going on at the moment. We've got this energy here down at the base of the trough, and you've got this feature right here. So this is the main system that brought all the flooding conditions to the mid-Atlantic region of the United States. But we've got this little feature right here, just to the east of that area of convection, that will get shifted quite rapidly across the North Atlantic, and then as it goes from the south side to the cold side of the jet, we will then see the system deepen quite dramatically here, and you can see it's starting to deepen, and then it makes an approach on Ireland as a fairly bona fide deep area of low pressure. It drops actually below 970 millibars. Notice it's quite a tight, compact system. It's not tropical, but it almost has a slight tropical look to it on this chart because of the compact nature of the system. It's not this big, long, spread out system. It's quite a compact area of low pressure with a deep center. These systems can be a little bit hard to predict because they're smaller, but also they can pack more of a punch because when all the energy is bundled, it's kind of centered into that one little circulation. You've got a lot of strong energy within that circulation rather than it being spread out over a larger area. So as we approach the period in the Wednesday morning, we'll start to see the conditions going really downhill across Ireland, Northern Ireland, winds becoming very strong out of the east, southeast. And then you can see here that the system is starting to weaken slightly according to the ECMWF as it moves across Ireland and the British Isles, but it will produce on coastal areas of Ireland, England and Wales in particular. We could see gusts in excess of 80 miles an hour with this system, widespread gusts 50, 60, possibly even locally 65 to 70. But this system looks at the moment to be crossing the southern side of Ireland, over Dublin, and then right in to the central portion of the UK here. So northwest England, that centre will be. Pressure is now up at 988 millibars. It is starting to spread out slightly as the central pressure starts to rise. The energy will start to kind of pull away from the centre slightly. But this looks to be quite an area of low pressure, to be honest, folks, and it could cause all sorts of issues. Bridge restrictions, ferry cancellations, issues on the roads with regards to even fallen trees, and a lot of water in the ground as well. So of course those strong winds mean that trees could come down. We've still got a lot of foliage on the trees as well, so therefore we could see some significant damage with trees, etc., etc. And then notice the ECMWF has another system that follows this. Thankfully, it's nowhere near as deep, as strong, as potent as this lead system here on Wednesday and Thursday, but it will enhance more wind and rain across the UK, I think, generally speaking. And then as we continue to play through, you see here higher pressure tries to build into the UK and Ireland here. This is right at the very, very end of the loop here. But it looks as if the model still has some disturbed weather moving in with a fairly fresh, cool airflow coming off the Atlantic here. So it doesn't look as if there's anything particularly warm to speak about in the next wee while anyway. Notice here we've got more systems over the tropical Atlantic, but I think we will start to see the Atlantic shutting down somewhat as the Julian oscillation continues to press into the west and central portion of the Pacific here. Playing through the 850 loop here, you can see some fairly cool air getting drafted in. Now notice if we play back, you can see here the system has some cool air mixed with some pretty warm air actually on the southern side. As we play through the loop, you notice it's running right along that boundary here, that demarcation between the cool to the north and the warm to the south. And we could see some relatively warm air getting wafted in briefly on the southern side of that system. Then as we play through, you can see here that there is some possibilities of actually a little bit of warmer air coming up on the back side of that system as the next system tries to make an approach on the UK. Of course, that warm air to the southeast of the system is always present, generally speaking. Then it gets blown out of the way, and we've got some fairly cool air moving in on the backside of the next area of low pressure here. And then we've got another system you can see here that may try to approach, but we've got some fairly bona fide cool air coming in the first week of October here. But this is a long way out, of course, a very, very long way out indeed. So you have to really kind of take that with a pinch of salt here. So let's have a look at the UK and see exactly what we're looking at with this system. We'll go back and look at the ECMWF, and we'll look at the UK specifically and see what this is showing here in terms of rainfall, etc., as well as the wind here. So we've got that fresh southwesterly wind going on at the moment here, and then as we play through the loop, we've got a frontal zone coming through, bringing showers, longer spells of rain, etc., etc., and then in comes that deep area of low pressure here, sweeps right across Cork, up through Dublin, over the Irish Sea, and then it looks as if it's going across the north of England here, and it could have a spell of heavy persistent rain followed by blustery showers. If we look at the wind here, you can see the wind gust potential from this system. So we'll skip back to the current period, and you can see here as that system comes in, it's indicating that we have got winds in excess of 143 kilometers per hour, but that is offshore. That's to the south of Ireland here. But then as we play through the loop here, it looks as if we've got wind gusts on the coast, England, Wales, and southern and eastern Ireland in excess of 115 kilometers per hour. So you could be talking 80 plus mile per hour winds, mainly on the coast. And you notice here the core of the strongest winds at the moment here are across England, Wales, and Ireland here. Scotland, closer to the centre or the north side of the centre, a lot less in the way of wind here. We may start to pick up more wind as that system exits out of the way, and then the next feature comes through towards the end of this week, and we could have the strongest winds transfer more towards the north and northwest here, so we need to keep an eye on that. But an active pattern at the moment, but as stated, the Julian oscillation on the move into the West Pacific may start to see that high over Europe, retrograde slightly west, shutting down the unsettled conditions for the early portion of October here. So that's it for today. I do appreciate you watching. Please like, share, and subscribe as always, and I'll see you again tomorrow with more. Bye for now.